I was holding a check for $124 million when my mother texted me to stay away from her wedding. She said I was an embarrassment. She said her new husband Preston did not want my poverty ruining their perfect Hamptons aesthetic. They had no idea I was exactly 30 seconds away from wiring $33 million to save their failing company. So I made a call that would destroy them instead. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Paige, and I am 34 years old. For the last 10 years, I have been the family disappointment. While my younger sister Ashley was marrying a corporate lawyer and vacationing in Aspen, I was working double shifts as a shift manager at Target just to keep the heat on in my studio apartment. My mother Brenda always looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, as if my struggle was a personal insult to her social standing. But everything changed 48 hours ago when I walked into a gas station, bought a Powerball ticket, and watched the numbers on my television screen match one by one. $200 million. After taxes, I was looking at a lump sum of $124 million. I sat in the VIP private client suite of JP Morgan Chase in Manhattan. The room smelled of expensive leather and old money. The view from the 45th floor looked down on the city I had struggled in for so long. I was wearing my red Target uniform vest over a faded gray hoodie because I had come straight from work to the lottery commission and then here. I could feel the eyes of the bank staff on me. They were polite because they had seen the check, but beneath the professional smiles, I saw the confusion. They were wondering how someone who looked like she clipped coupons for ramen noodles ended up with a 9-figure balance. My new lawyer, Mr. Henderson, sat across from me. He was a silver-haired man with sharp eyes who specialized in high-net-worth individuals who wanted to remain anonymous. He pushed a stack of documents toward me. "Miss Wilson, we have set up the blind trust as you requested. Your identity will remain a secret from the public. The funds are secure. Now regarding your specific request for the immediate wire transfer." I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from the sheer adrenaline of what I was about to do. I had spent the last 2 nights awake staring at the ceiling thinking about my mother. Despite everything, despite the years of neglect, and the way she let my stepfather Preston treat me, she was still my mom. She was getting married tomorrow in the Hamptons to Preston. It was a ceremony to renew their vows and celebrate Preston finally legalizing his business merger. But I knew the truth. I knew Preston was drowning in debt. I knew his real estate empire was a house of cards about to collapse. I had overheard him screaming at his accountants months ago. "I want to authorize a transfer of $33 million. I said, my voice trembling slightly. Mr. Henderson paused his pen, hovering over the document. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "To Preston Holdings, LLC. You are aware that this company is currently flagged as high risk, Miss Wilson. This is a significant portion of your winnings." "I know," I said. "It is a wedding gift. An anonymous one. I want to clear their debts. I want them to be free. I thought that if I did this, if I saved them without them even knowing it was me, maybe I would feel worthy. Maybe I would finally stop feeling like the black sheep." I wanted to walk into that wedding tomorrow knowing I was the reason they still had a roof over their heads. I wanted to sit in the back row and smile knowing I had saved them. It was pathetic, I know. But when you have been starved of affection for 3 decades, you will pay a high price for a crumb of it. "Prepare the transfer," I said. "But do not execute it until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I want it to clear right as the ceremony begins." Mr. Henderson nodded, noting the instructions. "Very well. The paperwork is ready. We just need your final digital signature tomorrow to release the funds." I left the bank feeling lighter than I had in years. I walked out onto the busy Manhattan streets, and for the first time the towering skyscrapers didn't feel oppressive. They felt like possibilities. I hailed a cab, not checking the price, and headed to a department store. I needed a dress for the wedding. Nothing flashy. I did not want to draw attention to myself. Just something nice enough that Preston would not sneer at me. I was standing in the dressing room, struggling with the zipper of a modest navy blue dress when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from my mother. My heart jumped. Maybe she was texting to say she was excited to see me. Maybe she wanted to know if I needed a ride from the train station. I picked up the phone. The screen was bright in the dim dressing room. Paige, the text read. I think it is best if you do not come to the wedding tomorrow. I stared at the words, unable to comprehend them. I blinked, waiting for a second text to say it was a joke or a typo. But then 3 dots appeared and another bubble popped up. Preston says your appearance would be distracting. We have important investors coming from Tokyo and London. He thinks you will look out of place, and frankly, you usually do. We do not want to explain your situation to people. It would just be embarrassing for everyone. We will catch up some other time. Love, Mom. I did not cry. That was the strangest part. I expected to shatter. I expected to fall to my knees in that cramped dressing room and weep. But instead, I felt a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. It was the feeling of a door slamming shut forever. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice hushed and hurried. Paige. I told you not to call right now, she hissed. I am at the venue doing a final walkthrough. Preston is very stressed. Mom, I said, my voice flat. You are uninviting me to your wedding the day before it happens. It is not uninviting, honey, she said, using that condescending tone she saved for when I was being difficult. We are just being practical. You know you do not fit in with Preston's crowd. You drive that rusted Honda. Your clothes are always from the discount rack. Preston is trying to close a deal that will save the company. He cannot have any distractions. He needs everything to look perfect. Success attracts success. Paige, you represent struggle. I represent struggle. The words hung in the air. Mom, I have something to tell you. I started ready to tell her about the lottery. Ready to tell her that I was the investor Preston was praying for. Not now, Paige. She cut me off. Preston is calling me. Just stay in the city. I will send you some photos. Do not make a scene. The line went dead. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I was wearing a dress I planned to buy with money that could buy the entire department store. And my own mother saw me as a stain on her perfect picture. The memories flooded back then. Not the happy ones I tried to cling to, but the real ones. The ones I had suppressed. I remembered 2 years ago when I got pneumonia. I had missed a week of work and could not pay my copay for the doctor. I went to their estate in the Hamptons, shivering and feverish. Preston opened the door. He looked at me like I was a stray dog. I just need $200 for the urgent care I had begged. I will pay you back. Preston had laughed. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and threw it at my feet. Take some vitamin C and get a second job, he had sneered. We are not a charity, Paige. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I remembered crawling on the ground to pick up that $20 bill because I needed it so badly. I remembered looking up and seeing my mother watching from the balcony, sipping white wine, turning her head away when our eyes met. I remembered last Christmas. I had driven my 2005 Honda Civic to their house. The heater was broken, and I drove 2 hours in freezing temperatures wrapped in blankets. When I arrived, my sister Ashley and her husband Jamal were standing in the driveway next to their matching Mercedes SUVs. Jamal, a corporate lawyer with an ego bigger than his paycheck, had laughed as I parked. Hey, Paige, he had shouted. Did you drive that scrap heap here or did you push it? You are bringing down the property value just by parking in the street. Move it around the block so the neighbors do not see. Ashley had giggled. Oh, Jamal, be nice. She is doing her best, even if her best is pathetic. They had laughed together, a shared joke at my expense. And inside the house, my mother had seated me at the kids' table, even though I was 32 years old, because there wasn't enough room at the main table for the adults. I stood in the dressing room, and the memory of that humiliation burned through the numbness. I looked at the dress I was wearing. It was modest. It was safe. It was the dress of a daughter trying to please people who would never be pleased. I took it off and threw it on the floor. I put my uniform vest back on. I walked out of the store and pulled out my phone. I dialed Mr. Henderson's number. It was late, but he answered immediately. "Miss Wilson, is everything all right?" "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady and cold. "That transfer we set up for tomorrow. The $33 million to Preston Holdings." "Yes. It is scheduled for 10 a.m. "Cancel it." There was a pause on the line. "Cancel it." "Yes. Kill the transaction." "And Mr. Henderson, I need you to do something else for me. I need you to look into Preston Holdings' debt structure, specifically who holds his primary loans." "Give me a moment," he said. I heard typing in the background. It appears his primary debt is held by a consortium of private lenders and a distressed asset fund that is currently looking to liquidate. He is in default, Miss Wilson. The bank is moving to foreclose on his Hamptons estate and seize his company assets if he does not make a balloon payment by noon tomorrow. That is why he needed your anonymous gift so badly. "Perfect," I said. "Buy it." "Excuse me. Buy the debt, Mr. Henderson. Buy the distressed asset fund. Use the lottery winnings. I want to own his debt. I want to be the one holding the mortgage on that house and the lien on his company. Can you do that by tomorrow morning?" Mr. Henderson's voice changed. It went from professional to intrigued. "With the amount of capital you have available, I can acquire the controlling interest in the debt portfolio by 9 a.m. It will cost a premium for the rush, but it is entirely possible. But Miss Wilson, if you do this, you will effectively own him. You can foreclose immediately." "That is the plan," I said. "And Mr. Henderson, one more thing. Yes, book me a car, not a taxi. I want a black SUV. And get me a stylist. I am going to that wedding. I thought you said you were uninvited." "I was uninvited as a daughter," I said. "But I am not going as a daughter anymore. I am going as the owner of the venue. I am going as the person who holds the deed to their lives." I hung up the phone. I stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue and watched the traffic rush by. For the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I did not feel like the poor relation or the family failure. I felt dangerous. I went back to my tiny apartment that night, but I did not sleep. I spent the night packing. Not clothes, but memories. I took the few photos I had of my father who died when I was 5. I took the drawing I made for my mother when I was 10 that she had thrown in the trash and I had retrieved. I put them all in a box. I was saying goodbye to the version of myself that begged for love. The next morning, the sun rose over a city that felt different because I was different. A team arrived at my apartment at 7 a.m. A stylist, a hair and makeup artist, and a tailor. Mr. Henderson did not cut corners. The stylist looked at my closet and frowned. "We are not using any of this," she said. She wheeled in a rack of clothes that cost more than my entire lifetime earnings. I chose a dress that was the opposite of modest. It was a structured architectural piece in a deep blood red. It was sharp. It was powerful. It was a dress that said, "I did not come here to apologize." When I looked in the mirror after they were done, I did not recognize myself. The tired girl with the messy bun and the dark circles was gone. Staring back at me was a woman who looked like she could buy and sell the world. My phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson. "It is done," he said. "The paperwork is signed. You are now the primary creditor for Preston Holdings and the legal owner of the mortgage on the Hamptons estate. The foreclosure notice has been prepared. I have the papers in my briefcase. I will meet you at the car." I walked downstairs. A black Cadillac Escalade was waiting. The driver held the door open. "To the Hamptons," I said. The drive took 2 hours. I watched the scenery change from the concrete of the city to the lush greenery of Long Island. We passed the mansions and the manicured lawns. This was the world I was never allowed to enter. the world where I was made to wait outside. We pulled up to the gate of the estate. It was a massive property overlooking the ocean. White tents were set up on the lawn. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Ferraris, Bentleys, Porsches. And there was my spot. The spot where Jamal had told me to park around the block. Drive right up to the front entrance, I told the driver. But miss, the valet is directing cars to the side lot. I own the driveway, I said. Drive to the front. The driver nodded and steered the massive SUV past the confused valet attendants right up to the red carpet leading into the main tent. I stepped out. The air smelled of sea salt and expensive perfume. Jamal was the first to see me. He was standing near the entrance wearing a tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne, holding court with some guests. He looked up annoyed that a car had blocked the view. "Hey, you cannot park here," he shouted, walking over. "This area is reserved for—" He stopped. He dropped his hand. He squinted at me. "Paige." He said my name like it was a question. He looked at the red dress. He looked at the diamonds in my ears. He looked at the chauffeured car. "What are you doing here?" he sputtered. "Mom told you not to come. And where did you get all this? Did you rent a car to try and impress us? Go park that thing down the road before Preston sees you. You are embarrassing yourself." I took off my sunglasses slowly. "Hello, Jamal," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm before a hurricane. "You need to leave," he hissed, looking around nervously. "Preston is already on edge. If he sees you here crashing the wedding, he will lose it." "Seriously, Paige, look at you. Wearing a costume and renting a limo doesn't change who you are. You are a cashier. Go home." I walked past him. I did not even slow down. "Hey, I am talking to you," he shouted, reaching out to grab my arm. The bodyguard Mr. Henderson had hired stepped in between us. He was 6'5" and looked like he ate gym equipment for breakfast. He didn't say a word. He just stared at Jamal. Jamal took a step back, his arrogance deflating instantly. I walked into the tent. It was beautiful. White roses everywhere. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the tent poles. A string quartet playing Vivaldi. It was the wedding my mother had always wanted. The wedding she sold her soul for. My sister Ashley was standing by the gift table. She looked beautiful in her maid of honor dress, but her face twisted into a sneer when she saw me. "Oh my God," she said, rushing over. "Paige, what is wrong with you? Mom is going to have a heart attack. You were explicitly told to stay away. And what are you wearing? You look like you are trying to outshine the bride. That is so tacky." "Where is Mom?" I asked. "She is in the bridal suite, hiding from you probably. You have to go. Now." Preston is waiting for a phone call from his investor. He is furious that the money has not hit the account yet. If he sees you, he will explode. "The money hasn't hit the account," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "That is strange. It was scheduled for 10 a.m. Ashley rolled her eyes. "What would you know about money, Paige? Just go. Here, take this." She reached into her purse and pulled out a $100 bill. "Take this and go get yourself a nice dinner somewhere else. Just get out of here." I looked at the $100 bill. It was the same gesture Preston had made 2 years ago. The same dismissal. They thought money was the only language that mattered. They thought they could buy my absence just like they thought they could buy respect. I didn't take the money. "I am not going anywhere, Ashley," I said. "I have a gift for Mom, and I have a message for Preston." I walked toward the front of the tent where the altar was set up. Guests were starting to take their seats. I saw faces I recognized, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had watched me be treated like garbage for years and said nothing, people who smiled at my mother's jokes about my failures. They whispered as I walked down the aisle. "Is that Paige? She looks different." I thought she wasn't invited. I reached the front row. Preston was standing there talking to his best man. He looked sweaty. He kept checking his phone. He looked like a man who knew the walls were closing in, but was trying to keep up appearances for one last hour. He looked up and saw me. His face went purple. You, he snarled. He marched over to me, ignoring the guests. I told Brenda to handle you. Get out. Now. I do not want your bad luck infecting this day. I am waiting for a call that will save this company, and I do not need you distracting me with your neediness. I looked him in the eye. The call isn't coming, Preston. He froze. What did you say? The investor, I said clearly so the front row could hear. The anonymous investor who was going to wire $33 million to bail out your company. They aren't going to call. And the money isn't coming. Preston laughed a nervous, shaky laugh. What would you know about it? You stock shelves for a living. Security. Get her out of here. Mr. Henderson stepped forward from behind me. He placed a briefcase on the table next to the altar. Mr. Preston, he said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. I am Mr. Henderson. I represent the trust that was scheduled to fund your company today. Preston's attitude flipped instantly. He smoothed his jacket. He smiled a greasy, desperate smile. Oh, thank God. Mr. Henderson, I apologize for my stepdaughter. She is troubled. Please ignore her. Did the transfer go through? Is everything settled? The transfer has been canceled, Mr. Henderson said. Canceled. Preston's voice cracked. But we had an agreement. I have loans coming due at noon. If that money does not clear, I lose everything. We know, Mr. Henderson said. That is why my client decided to take a different approach. Instead of investing in your company, my client has purchased your debt. Purchased my debt? Preston looked confused. Who? Who is your client? Mr. Henderson turned and gestured to me. Ms. Paige Wilson. Preston looked at me. Ashley looked at me. Jamal looked at me. The whole room looked at me. Paige Preston whispered, This is a joke. She has no money. She is a failure. Ms. Wilson won the Powerball jackpot 48 hours ago, Mr. Henderson announced to the room. She is currently worth $124 million. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, she is the sole owner of the mortgage on this estate and the primary creditor for Preston Holdings. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a world turning upside down. I watched the realization hit Preston's eyes. I watched him do the math. I watched the arrogance drain out of him, leaving only fear. He looked at the foreclosure notice Mr. Henderson pulled from the briefcase. You own the house, he stammered. I do, I said. And Preston, I have a strict policy about who I allow on my property. I do not allow people who throw $20 bills at sick relatives. I do not allow people who call their family members embarrassments. Preston's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the table for support. Paige, honey, wait. We can talk about this. I was under stress. You know I love you. You are my daughter. I am not your daughter, I said. I am a stain, remember? And I am about to scrub you out. Just then my mother came running out of the bridal suite. She had heard the commotion. She was wearing a white gown that cost $10,000. She looked at Preston's pale face. She looked at me in my red dress. What is going on? She demanded. Paige, why are you still here? Your daughter just bought the house, Brenda Preston choked out. She won the lottery. She owns everything. My mother stopped. Her eyes went wide. She looked at me, and for a second I saw the calculation. I saw her rewrite history in her head in real time. Paige, she gasped, bringing her hands to her mouth. Oh my God, you won. I knew it. I always knew you were special. She ran toward me, arms open wide, tears instantly springing to her eyes. My baby, my wonderful, brilliant baby. I am so happy for you. This is a miracle. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. Don't, I said. But honey, it is Mom. We are family. This changes everything. We can finally be happy. Preston apologized. Right, Preston. We can all live here together. It will be wonderful. I reached into my purse. It changes nothing. Mom, I said. You told me not to come. You told me I was an embarrassment. You chose him over me for years. You watched him mistreat me, and you said nothing because you liked the lifestyle he provided. I pulled out a check. Well, the lifestyle is gone. I am foreclosing on the house. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises before I call the sheriff. Mom stared at the check in my hand. Her eyes lit up with greed. What is that? She asked. Is that for us? To help us move? I handed it to her. She looked at the amount. $200. It was the exact amount she had told me to ask for when I was sick. That is for a taxi, I said, and a hotel room for the night. After that, you are on your own. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Mom. Isn't that what you always told me? My mother screamed. She threw the check on the ground. She lunged at me, but the bodyguard stepped in. You ungrateful brat, she shrieked. I gave you life. And I am taking mine back, I said. I turned to the guests. The wedding is canceled, I announced. Please clear the property. I walked out of the tent. I walked past Jamal, who was sitting on a bench with his head in his hands, realizing his wife just lost her inheritance. I walked past Ashley, who was sobbing into her bouquet. I got back into the black SUV. Where to, Miss Wilson? The driver asked. The city, I said. I have a foundation to start, and I want to get some pizza. As we drove away, I looked back one last time. I saw the white tent collapsing as the crew began to dismantle it. I saw my family, small and insignificant, arguing in the driveway. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. 6 months later, I was living in a penthouse in Manhattan. I had started a nonprofit that helped women escape financial abuse. I was busy. I was happy. I opened my email one morning. There was a message from Ashley. Subject: Please help. Page: We are living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Preston is facing fraud charges because he tried to hide assets. Mom is depressed. We need help. Please, we are family. I hovered my mouse over the delete button. I thought about the girl who drove a cold car for 2 hours just to be mocked. I thought about the woman who stood in a dressing room being told she wasn't wanted. I pressed delete. And then I went to work. Because family isn't who you are related to, it's who treats you with respect. And I had finally learned to respect myself enough to let them go. The drive to the Hamptons felt like crossing into a different universe. My 2005 Honda Civic rattled violently as I pushed it past 60 miles per hour, the rusted muffler coughing out gray smoke that trailed behind me like a dirty ribbon. The air conditioning had died 3 summers ago, so I had the windows down, letting the humid July air whip my hair around my face. As I crossed the bridge onto the island, the landscape shifted. The concrete and grime of the city melted away, replaced by manicured hedges that cost more than my college tuition, and driveways long enough to land a small plane on. I was entering the kingdom of the elite, the world my mother had sold her soul to join, and I was invading it in a vehicle that was barely street legal. I checked the GPS on my phone, which was mounted to the dashboard with duct tape. 2 miles until the resort. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll, but I forced my grip on the steering wheel to loosen. I was not the poor relation anymore. I was not the charity case coming to beg for leftovers. I was the wolf in sheep's clothing, and I was about to walk into the henhouse. I glanced at the passenger seat where my old purse sat. Inside was the paperwork that Mr. Henderson had prepared. The deed, the loan transfer documents, the foreclosure notice. It was heavy, not in weight but in power. I pulled up to the main gate of the resort. The security guard in the booth looked at my car with undisguised suspicion. He didn't even open the window at first, just stared at the duct tape holding my side mirror in place. I rolled down my window and said my name. He checked his clipboard, frowned, checked it again, and then reluctantly hit the button to open the wrought iron gates. As I drove through, I saw him pick up his radio, likely warning the main building that something unsightly was approaching. The driveway was lined with century-old oak trees, their branches creating a canopy of dappled sunlight. Ahead, the main building rose like a white palace against the blue sky. A line of cars was moving slowly toward the valet stand. a Bentley, a Porsche, a G-Wagon, and then me. The engine of my Honda sputtered loudly as I idled behind the G-Wagon, the sound echoing off the pristine white facade of the resort like a gunshot in a library. Guests in silk dresses and linen suits turned their heads, their expressions shifting from curiosity to distaste. I could feel their judgment radiating through the windshield. I pulled up to the valet stand. The young man in the white uniform stiffened. He looked at the G-Wagon pulling away, then looked at my car, and his face contorted into a sneer. He didn't open my door. He didn't offer a ticket. He just walked up to my open window and leaned down, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Delivery entrance is around the back," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "We don't take deliveries at the main portico." "I am not a delivery driver," I said, my voice calm despite the heat rising in my cheeks. "I am a guest. I am here for the Wilson Preston wedding." The valet let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked at my tires, which were bald. He looked at the rust eating away at the wheel wells. "Ma'am, I cannot park this here. This is a 5-star resort. We have standards for the vehicles we keep in the front lot. You are dripping oil on the cobblestones. You need to move. Now." I was about to to tell him that I could buy this entire resort and turn it into a parking lot for rusted Hondas if I wanted to, when a shadow fell over the car. A figure stepped out from the shade of the portico, moving with the aggressive stride of someone who thinks they own the world. It was Jamal, my brother-in-law. He looked impeccable in a midnight blue tuxedo that I knew cost $5,000 because he had bragged about it in the family group chat for weeks. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He looked like the picture of success, the perfect addition to my mother's new life. But as he got closer, I saw the ugly sneer twisting his handsome face. He walked right past the valet and slammed his hand onto the hood of my car. The metal groaned under the impact. "What in God's name do you think you are doing?" he hissed, leaning into my window. The smell of expensive cologne and champagne wafted into the car, overpowering the scent of old upholstery and gasoline. "Hello, Jamal," I said, staring straight ahead. "I am here for the wedding." "Are you deaf?" He spat, his voice low and venomous. "Did you not get the messages Brenda told you to stay away? Preston told you to stay away. Ashley told you to stay away. Yet here you are rolling up in this pile of garbage like a bad penny." He stood up and looked around frantically, checking to see if any of the important guests had noticed me. His eyes darted to a group of investors standing by the fountain, then back to me with intensified fury. "You are doing this on purpose, aren't you? You just cannot stand that we are happy. You cannot stand that we are succeeding. You have to drag your poverty right to our doorstep just to humiliate us. Look at this thing. It is leaking fluids everywhere. You are polluting the air just by being here." I turned my head slowly to look at him. His eyes were bulging slightly, a vein throbbing in his forehead. This was the man my sister had married, a man who measured worth by the shine of a car and the label on a suit. "I was invited, Jamal. I am family." "Family." He laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "You are not family. You are a liability. You are a stain on the tablecloth. Preston has senators coming today. He has investors from Tokyo. Do you know what they will think if they see this monstrosity parked next to their limousines? They will think we associate with losers. And Preston does not associate with losers." He reached through the window and tried to grab the keys from the ignition. I slapped his hand away. "Do not touch my car," I warned him. My voice was low, but it had a steel edge to it that I had never used with him before. He recoiled, looking shocked that I had fought back. "You have 5 seconds to turn this scrap heap around and get off this property," Jamal threatened, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "If you are not gone, I am calling security. I will have them drag you out. I will have this car towed to the scrapyard where it belongs. You are ruining everything, Paige, just like you always do. Why can't you just disappear? Why can't you just let us be great without dragging us down into your gutter?" I looked at him. really looked at him, I saw the fear behind the anger. He was terrified. He was terrified that if the facade cracked, if the perfect image was tarnished even a little bit, his whole world would crumble. He needed me to be the failure so he could feel like a success. He needed me to be the scapegoat so he could be the hero. But he didn't know that the script had flipped. He didn't know that the woman sitting in the rusted Honda had the power to strip the tuxedo right off his back. "I am not leaving, Jamal," I said, shifting the car into park. "And you are going to want to move out of the way, because I have a gift for Preston. And trust me, he is going to want to receive it." Jamal stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had expected me to cry. He had expected me to beg or to apologize or to shrink away like I had done 1,000 times before. He didn't know what to do with this new version of me, this version that didn't flinch. The valet looked nervously between us. "Sir, should I call the manager?" Jamal slammed his hand on the roof of my car again. "No. I will handle this trash myself." He grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. "Get out!" he screamed, losing all pretense of composure. "Get out, before I drag you out. You are not ruining this day for Ashley. You are not ruining this for me. I worked too hard to get into this family to have you mess it up with your pathetic need for attention." I unbuckled my seatbelt slowly. I stepped out of the car. My red dress caught the sunlight blazing like a signal fire against the gray pavement. I stood up to my full height. I wasn't wearing my work boots today. I was wearing heels that put me eye to eye with him. I looked at the valet. "Park the car," I said, tossing him the keys, "and be careful with the transmission. It sticks in second gear." Then I looked at Jamal. He was frozen, staring at my dress, staring at the diamonds in my ears, staring at the way I held myself. "You wanted me to disappear, Jamal," I said, stepping past him toward the grand entrance of the hotel. "But I am afraid that is impossible, because I am the only one here who is actually real." I walked toward the double doors, leaving him standing next to my leaking car, his mouth agape, the first crack appearing in his perfect world. The air smelled of expensive lilies and impending disaster. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was the storm. I walked past Jamal, leaving him sputtering in the driveway, and pushed through the heavy double doors into the grand foyer of the resort. The transition was jarring. Outside, the air had been thick with humidity and the smell of exhaust from my dying car, but inside it was a different world entirely. The air conditioning was set to a bone-chilling temperature that made the skin on my arms prickle. The scent of expensive lilies and desperation hung heavy in the room. The ballroom was a sea of pastel silks and linen suits, a carefully curated display of wealth that I knew was built on a foundation of lies and maxed-out credit cards. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, like frozen tears catching the light and scattering it across the faces of people who would not have spit on me if I were on fire yesterday. I stood at the top of the short staircase leading down to the reception area, my red dress blazing like a fresh wound against the sea of beige and cream. I scanned the room looking for the one person who would inevitably try to stop me before I reached Preston. I did not have to look long. Ashley was holding court near the champagne tower. My younger sister, the golden child, the one who had never known a day of want in her life. She looked radiant in a maid-of-honor gown that I knew cost more than my rent for an entire year. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on the arm of a senator's son. She looked perfect. She looked fake. She looked exactly like the kind of woman who would watch her sister drown and complain that the splashing ruined her hair. Her eyes swept the room, scanning for approval, and then they landed on me. The laughter died in her throat. Her smile faltered, cracking like cheap porcelain. I saw the color drain from her face, leaving her pale beneath her spray tan. She excused herself from her circle of admirers with a frantic wave of her hand and started marching toward me. Her movements were stiff, her shoulders hunched as if she were preparing for a physical fight. She did not want a scene, she wanted an erasure. She wanted me gone before I could stain the perfect canvas she and my mother had painted for their guests. I did not wait for her. I descended the stairs, my heels clicking a sharp rhythmic warning against the marble floor. I moved with a confidence I had bought and paid for, a confidence born from the knowledge that I could buy everyone in this room and still have enough left over to burn. Ashley intercepted me near a large marble pillar, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Her nails dug into my skin, sharp and painful, but I did not flinch. She yanked me toward a secluded alcove, away from the prying eyes of the guests, dragging me into the shadows like a dirty secret. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper that barely carried over the sound of the string quartet. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. Her eyes were wild with panic and fury. "Hello, Ashley," I said, my voice cool and detached. "You look lovely. Is that Vera Wang? It must have cost a fortune. Shame it was bought with money that does not exist." "Shut up," she snapped, checking over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. "Are you insane? Did you not get the texts? Mom told you to stay away. Jamal told you to stay away. We all agreed that today was not about you and your drama." I pulled my arm free from her grasp, brushing the spot where she had touched me as if wiping away dirt. "I am not here for drama, Ashley," I said. "I am here for the wedding. I am family, remember? Or does that only count when you need a kidney or a babysitter?" "Family." She scoffed, a cruel, ugly sound. "You are not family, Paige. You are a charity case. You are a burden. Look at you." She looked me up and down, her eyes raking over my red dress with disdain. "Where did you get that? Did you rent it? Did you steal it? You think putting on a fancy dress changes anything? You are still the same pathetic girl who begs for gas money. You are still the failure who works retail while the rest of us actually build lives." I stood taller, letting her words wash over me. A week ago they would have stung. A week ago they would have made me shrink into myself, made me apologize, made me retreat. But today they just felt like dry leaves crunching under my boot. "I am not begging for anything," I said. "Oh, please," Ashley rolled her eyes, reaching into her small beaded clutch. "Do not insult my intelligence. I know why you are here. You heard Preston was closing a big deal. You heard there would be rich people here. You came to sniff around for handouts like a stray dog at a butcher shop." She pulled out a crisp $100 bill. She held it out to me between two fingers, as if it were contaminated. "Here," she said, thrusting it toward my chest. "Is this what you want? Is this enough to make you go away? Go find a diner, Paige. Go buy yourself a meal that does not come in a wrapper. Just get out. You are embarrassing Mom. You are embarrassing me. Today is the most important day of Mom's life, and you are ruining it just by breathing the same air." I looked at the money. It was such a small, insignificant piece of paper. To her, it was a weapon. To me, it was a joke. I thought about the $124 million sitting in my account. I thought about the fact that I could buy this entire hotel and turn it into a shelter for the people she despised. I reached out and took the bill. Ashley let out a sigh of relief, her shoulders dropping. She smirked, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had bought me off again, just like they always did. "See," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I knew it. You are so predictable. Now go. The valet is out front. Do not make me call security." I looked her dead in the eye and slowly, deliberately, tore the $100 bill in half. The sound was soft, a dry rip that seemed to echo in the small alcove. Ashley stared at my hands, her mouth falling open in shock. I tore the halves again, and again, until the money was nothing but green confetti in my palm. I opened my hand and let the pieces flutter to the floor between us, landing on her expensive satin shoes. "I do not want your money, Ashley," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I have never wanted your money. I wanted a sister. I wanted a family. But I see now that was too much to ask." You," she stammered, unable to process what I had just done. "That was $100. Are you crazy?" I took a step closer to her, invading her personal space, forcing her to look up at me. "I am not here for handouts," I said. "I am here to watch the show. I am here to see what happens when the curtain falls and everyone sees the rot behind the scenery. But before I take my seat, there is something I want. Ashley backed up until she hit the wall, her eyes darting around looking for help. What she whispered, fear creeping into her voice for the first time. What do you want? Grandma's pearls, I said. Ashley froze. Her hand went instinctively to her throat, where a string of lustrous, creamy pearls rested against her skin. What she squeaked. You heard me, I said, leaning in. Grandma Dorothy's pearls. The ones she promised me on her deathbed. The ones she wrote in her will for me. The ones Mom stole from my room the day after the funeral and gave to you because she said they looked better on someone with a future. Ashley clutched the necklace, her knuckles turning white. You are delusional, she said, her voice shaking. Mom gave these to me. They are mine. You do not deserve them. You would probably just pawn them for rent money. I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. I am not going to pawn them, Ashley. I am going to wear them. Because they belong to me. They are the only thing in this entire room that is real. Everything else, this wedding, this wealth, this happiness you are parading around, it is all fake. It is all borrowed time and borrowed money. But those pearls are real, and I am taking them back. I held out my hand, palm up. Give them to me. Ashley shook her head, backing away as much as she could, which was nowhere. No. You are crazy. Security. Somebody help. Do not scream. I warned her. My voice dropping to a whisper that was far more terrifying than a shout. If you scream, if you make a scene right now, I will walk into that ballroom, and I will tell everyone exactly how Preston financed this wedding. I will tell them about the loans. I will tell them about the shell companies. I will tell them about the foreclosure notice that is sitting in my lawyer's briefcase right now. Her eyes went wide. You don't know anything. I know everything, I said. I know about the $33 million he is praying for. I know he is sweating through his custom suit right now, waiting for a wire transfer that is never going to come. I know this house, this party, your car. It is all smoke and mirrors. And I am holding the wind machine. She stared at me, trying to gauge if I was bluffing. She looked at my face, my eyes, which were hard and unyielding. She saw something there she had never seen before. She saw power. Give me the pearls, Ashley, I repeated. Or I start talking. And trust me, the story I have to tell is a lot more interesting than your maid of honor speech. Her hands were trembling as she reached up to the clasp. She fumbled with it, her fingers slipping on the gold latch. She was crying now, silent tears of frustration and humiliation leaking from her eyes, ruining her perfect makeup. I hate you, she whispered, as the clasp finally clicked open. I have always hated you. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous. She dropped the necklace into my hand. The pearls were warm from her skin. They felt heavy. They felt like justice. I fastened them around my own neck without a mirror. They settled against my collarbone, cool and solid. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. Grandma was with me now. With me. I do not hate you, Ashley, I said, looking at her tear-streaked face. I pity you. You spent your whole life trying to be what they wanted, and you ended up just as hollow as they are. I turned away from her, smoothing the skirt of my red dress. Now, if you will excuse me, I said. I have a wedding to attend, and I believe the groom is expecting a gift. I walked out of the alcove, leaving her sobbing silently among the torn pieces of the $100 bill. I walked back into the light of the ballroom, the pearls glowing around my neck, the red dress swishing around my legs. Heads turned as I passed. People whispered, but I did not care. I was not the poor relation anymore. I was the reckoning, and the show was just beginning. I watched Ashley crumble in the alcove, leaving her with the shredded remains of her insults scattered across the floor like confetti. I did not look back. I turned my heel and stepped out of the shadows back into the blinding brilliance of the main foyer. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a strange cold adrenaline that made my vision razor sharp. I felt powerful. I felt dangerous. For the first time in my life, I was not the girl waiting for permission to exist. I was the one holding the gavel. I scanned the room again, looking for the final gatekeeper. I knew she would be here. My mother never missed an opportunity to be seen, especially when she was draped in the kind of wealth she had spent her entire life chasing. And then I saw her. Brenda emerged from the bridal suite adjacent to the ballroom entrance. She looked like a vision from a magazine, but up close, the image fractured. She was wearing a floor-length gown of champagne silk that shimmered like liquid gold under the crystal lights. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat stones that I knew were likely leased or bought on credit, just like everything else in Preston's precarious empire. Her hair was piled high in an intricate updo that must have taken hours to construct. She looked beautiful, she looked expensive, and she looked terrified. Her eyes were darting around the room, scanning the faces of the guests with a manic intensity. She was checking for approval. She was checking for cracks in the facade. She was checking to make sure that the illusion of her perfect life was holding together for just one more hour. Her gaze swept over the crowd, past the senator's son, past the waiters offering caviar blinis, and then it landed on me. For a heartbeat, I saw the mother I remembered from my childhood, the woman who used to sing to me when I had a fever, the woman who had once been my whole world. I saw a flicker of recognition, and for a split second, I foolishly thought she might smile. I thought she might see her daughter standing there looking strong and beautiful and feel a surge of pride. But then the recognition turned into horror. Her face crumpled not with emotion, but with panic. She did not open her arms. She did not rush forward to embrace me. Instead, she recoiled as if she had seen a ghost or a bill collector. She looked left then right, checking to see who was watching. Seeing that the coast was relatively clear, she hiked up the skirt of her $3,000 gown and rushed toward me. She did not walk like a mother greeting a child. She walked like a security guard intercepting a threat. She reached me and immediately grabbed my elbow, her fingers digging into my flesh with a desperate strength. She did not hug me. She steered me. She shoved me backward toward a heavy velvet curtain that separated the ballroom from the service corridors, trying to hide me from view. "Paige," she hissed, her voice tight and trembling. "What are you doing here? Are you insane?" "Hello, Mother," I said, allowing her to push me into the semi-darkness of the corridor. "You look lovely." "Don't give me that," she snapped, her eyes wild. "I texted you. I specifically told you not to come. I told you that Preston did not want you here. Why do you have to be so difficult? Why can't you just let me have this one day?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. Up close, I could see the heavy makeup settling into the fine lines around her eyes. I could see the sweat beading on her upper lip. She wasn't glowing with bridal joy. She was vibrating with anxiety. "I am your daughter," I said, my voice calm and level. "I thought you might want me at your wedding, regardless of what Preston wants." She let out a short, harsh laugh. "Want you? Paige, look at you. You don't fit in here. This isn't a family picnic. This is a high-stakes event." She gestured vaguely at the ballroom beyond the curtain. "Do you have any idea what is happening today? Do you have any clue what is on the line? Preston is a wreck. He has been throwing up all morning." "Is he?" I asked, a small smile touching my lips. "Why is that?" "Because he is waiting," she whispered, leaning in close as if sharing a state secret. "He is waiting for a phone call that is going to save us. There is an investor, Paige, a mystery investor from a trust. They are supposed to wire $33 million into his account this morning. If that money doesn't arrive by noon, we lose everything. We lose the house. We lose the company. We lose it all." She gripped my arms, her nails biting into my skin. "He is terrified. He thinks you are bad luck. He thinks every time you show up with your sad eyes and your empty pockets, something goes wrong. He told me that if I let you ruin this deal, if I let you embarrass him in front of these people, he is done." So that was it. I was the scapegoat. I was the reason for their failures. I was the bad omen. It wasn't his bad business deals or his gambling or his greed. It was me. "So you are hiding me," I said. To protect your investment. I am protecting my future, she spat. And yours if you weren't so stupid. If this deal goes through, we are set for life. I can finally relax. I can finally stop worrying about bills. Don't you want that for me? Don't you want your mother to be happy? I looked at the desperation in her eyes. It was pathetic. She was selling me out for a lifestyle. She was trading her relationship with her child for a house in the Hamptons and a husband who despised her daughter. The investor isn't coming, Mother, I said. She blinked, confusion clouding her panic. What? The money, I said clearly. The $33 million. It is not coming. The investor changed their mind. She stared at me. Then she shook her head, a dismissive scowl forming on her face. What would you know about it? She scoffed. You stack boxes at a discount store. You don't know anything about high finance. You don't know anything about Preston's business. I know more than you think, I said. I know that the transfer was scheduled for 10 o'clock. It is now 10:15. Has his phone rung? Has he come running out to tell you the good news? She froze. Her eyes darted to the clock on the wall. The color drained from her cheeks. No, she whispered more to herself than to me. No, he is just. There is probably a delay. Banks are slow. It is a lot of money. It is not a delay, I said. The transfer was cancelled. I know because. She cut me off, her panic turning into rage. Stop it. Just stop it. You are trying to scare me. You are trying to ruin this because you are jealous. You have always been jealous. You are jealous of Ashley. You are jealous of me. You can't stand to see us succeed because you are a failure. She shoved me hard. I stumbled back a step, my heels catching on the carpet. Get out, she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at the service exit. Get out of here right now. I don't want to see your face. If Preston sees you, he will have a stroke. He is on the edge, Paige. He needs this money. He needs this day to be perfect. And you are a stain on this day. I straightened my dress. I smoothed the red fabric over my hips. I looked at this woman who had raised me, who had taught me to tie my shoes, who had walked me to the bus stop, and I realized that I didn't know her at all. Or maybe I did know her and I just hadn't wanted to admit who she really was. I tried to help you, I said quietly. I tried to save you. Save me. She laughed, a cruel, brittle sound. You can't even save yourself. You are drowning, Paige. You have always been drowning, and I am not going to let you pull me down with you. She reached into her purse, which was hanging off her shoulder. She fumbled around inside and pulled out a wad of cash. She didn't count it. She just shoved it at me. Here, take it. It is probably $500. It is more than you make in a week. Just take it and go. Go back to the city. Go back to your tiny apartment and your sad life and leave us alone. I looked at the money in her hand. It was crinkled and messy. It looked dirty. I don't want your money, Mom. Then what do you want? She screamed, losing control entirely. What do you want from me? I wanted you to choose me, I said. Just once. I wanted you to choose me over the money, over the house, over him. She stared at me, breathing hard. Her chest heaved beneath the silk gown. For a second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But then she blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the hard, cold shine of self-preservation. I choose survival, she said, her voice flat. I choose security, and you offer neither. She turned me around, grabbing my shoulders and physically pushing me toward the exit door. Go, she commanded. Leave. If you are still here when the ceremony starts, I will have security throw you out. I mean it, Paige. Do not make me do that. She gave me one final shove. I stumbled through the door and into the bright sunlight of the loading dock. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the cool air and the smell of lilies, leaving me in the heat with the smell of garbage dumpsters and the hum of the kitchen generators. I stood there for a moment, looking at the closed metal door. I could hear the muffled sounds of the string quartet starting up inside. The ceremony was beginning. My mother was walking down the aisle toward a man who viewed her as an accessory toward a life built on debt and deceit. She thought she had won. She thought she had disposed of the problem. She thought she had pushed her failure of a daughter out into the alley where she belonged. But she didn't know. She didn't know that the investor she was praying for was standing right outside her door. She didn't know that the security she craved was holding a check for $124 million in her purse. She didn't know that by pushing me out she had sealed her own fate. I straightened my spine. I walked around the side of the building, my heels clicking on the pavement. I wasn't leaving. I was just taking the scenic route. "You want security, Mom?" I whispered to the empty air. "You want survival." I rounded the corner and saw the main entrance of the tent. Guests were seated. The music was swelling. Preston was standing at the altar, sweating, waiting for a miracle. Well, I thought, stepping onto the grass. Here comes the miracle. But it is not the one you asked for. I walked toward the tent, ready to give my mother exactly what she had chosen. She had chosen money over family, so I was going to show her just how much that choice was going to cost. I walked into the white tent and the atmosphere changed instantly. The air inside was conditioned to a crisp chill, a stark contrast to the humid heat of the parking lot, but it felt heavy. It felt like the air inside a mausoleum. Hundreds of guests sat in rows of gold Chiavari chairs, their faces turned toward the front of the room, where an altar had been constructed from imported white roses and driftwood. It was a masterpiece of design, a six-figure stage set for a play about a happy family that did not exist. I stood at the very back, near the entrance, where the caterers were staging the champagne flutes. I was a splash of blood red against the sea of cream and pastel linens. I smoothed the fabric of my dress over my hips, feeling the cool weight of my grandmother's pearls against my skin. They were my armor. They were my connection to the only truth this family had ever known. Preston was already standing at the podium. He had decided to give a pre-ceremony speech, a toast to himself before the actual vows began. It was typical Preston. He could not stand to let the bride be the center of attention even for an hour. He needed the room to look at him, to admire him, to fear him. He looked the part of the titan of industry he pretended to be. His tuxedo was bespoke cut to hide the paunch of his stomach and emphasize his broad shoulders. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. He gripped the sides of the podium with hands that were manicured, and soft hands that had never done a day of hard labor in their lives. He was smiling, but it was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of conquest. "Welcome, friends," he boomed, his voice amplified by the expensive sound system. "Thank you for joining us on this magnificent day." As I look out at this gathering, I am reminded of what it takes to build a life. It takes vision. It takes strength. It takes the ability to make the hard choices that lesser men shy away from. He paused for effect, letting his gaze sweep over the senators, the bankers, the socialites. He was selling them a story. He was selling them the myth of Preston the self-made man, Preston the genius developer. He was selling them a lie wrapped in silk. "I have spent the last decade building an empire," he continued, his voice dropping to a confidential baritone. "A legacy that will stand the test of time. This estate, this gathering, it is all a testament to that hard work. We have weathered storms, we have faced challenges, but we have always come out on top because we refuse to accept mediocrity. We refuse to let weakness drag us down." He lifted his chin and his eyes locked onto me. He saw me standing in the back alone and defiant. The smile did not leave his face, but his eyes went cold. It was a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. It was the same look he had given me when I asked for money for the doctor. The same look he gave me every Christmas when I walked through the door. It was a look that said, "You are dirt. You are nothing. You are the mistake we are trying to erase." He stared at me for a long moment, silently daring me to make a move, silently commanding me to disappear. He thought he had the upper hand. He thought I was just the pathetic stepdaughter crashing a party she wasn't worthy of. He had no idea that I wasn't just a guest. I was the landlord. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I lifted my chin, mimicking his posture, and stared right back. I let a small knowing smile play on my lips. It was a smile that said, "I know what you are waiting for, Preston. And it is not coming." He blinked first. He looked away, clearly unsettled by my presence but unwilling to break his character in front of his audience. He cleared his throat and turned back to the crowd. "Yes," he said, his voice slightly louder, slightly more brittle. "We refuse to let anything stop our progress. Today marks a new chapter, a chapter of unprecedented growth. I have finalized a deal this very morning that will secure our family's future for generations to come." He checked his watch. It was a subtle movement, but I saw it. He was checking the time. It was 10:20. The wire transfer was supposed to have cleared 20 minutes ago. He was waiting for the vibration in his pocket. He was waiting for the text message from his bank confirming that $33 million had landed in his account, saving him from ruin. He didn't know that at 9:59 I had made a call. He didn't know that the only thing landing in his account today was a notification of insufficient funds. I watched him sweat. A single bead of perspiration trickled down his temple, dampening his silver hairline. He wiped it away quickly with a handkerchief, laughing nervously. "It is a warm day," he joked, "but the heat is good. It means the sun is shining on us." Suddenly, a low buzzing sound filled the silence of the tent. It was coming from the podium. Preston had left his phone on the shelf directly under the microphone. The vibration was amplified, booming through the speakers like the growl of a hungry animal. Preston's face lit up. This was it. This was the confirmation. This was his salvation. "Ah," he said, holding up a hand to the crowd. "You will have to excuse me. Business never sleeps. This is the good news we have been waiting for." He reached for the phone. He looked at the screen, expecting to see a green checkmark, expecting to see a balance with a lot of zeros. I watched his face transform. It wasn't a text from the bank confirming a deposit. It was a barrage of notifications. His brow furrowed. He tapped the screen, his fingers moving jerkily. He scrolled. The smile slid off his face like wet paint. He tapped again, harder this time, as if hitting the screen could change what he was seeing. The buzzing didn't stop. The phone kept vibrating, dancing across the wooden shelf of the podium. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was relentless. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Preston stared at the phone. He looked up at the crowd, his eyes wide and unfocused. He looked lost. I, he stammered. Just then there was a commotion at the side entrance of the tent. A young man in a cheap suit burst in. It was Gary, Preston's personal assistant. Gary was usually invisible, a shadow who fetched coffee and dry cleaning. But today Gary was the center of attention. He was running. He was sprinting down the side aisle, his tie flying over his shoulder, his face slick with sweat and terror. He wasn't looking at the guests. He wasn't looking at the flowers. He was looking at Preston with the expression of a man who has just seen a tidal wave on the horizon. Preston saw him. He froze. He knew. Deep down in the rot of his soul, he knew that Gary wouldn't be running unless the world was ending. Gary leaped onto the low stage of the altar, scrambling up next to the podium. He didn't care about the microphone. He didn't care about the hundreds of people watching. He grabbed Preston's arm. "Mr. Preston?" He gasped, his voice a harsh whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. "Sir, we have a problem." Preston tried to shove him away, trying to maintain the illusion for just one more second. "Not now, Gary," he hissed. "Get down. We are in the middle of a ceremony." Gary didn't let go. He leaned in closer, his eyes bulging. "Sir, you don't understand. It is the bank. They just called." Preston went still. He looked at Gary. He looked at the phone that was still buzzing on the shelf. "What about the bank?" Preston whispered. "Did the wire clear? Is the money there?" Gary shook his head violently, tears starting to form in his eyes. "No, sir. The wire was cancelled." Preston swayed. He gripped the podium so hard his knuckles turned white. Cancelled. That is impossible. It was a guaranteed transfer. It was a trust. Call them back. Tell them it is a mistake. I did, Sir Gary cried. I called them. I called the investors. I called everyone. It wasn't a mistake. The donor rescinded the offer. They pulled the funding, sir. The 33 million is gone. It is not coming. The silence in the tent was absolute. The string quartet had stopped playing. The guests were leaning forward, sensing the disaster, watching the play unfold. They couldn't hear every word, but they could see the panic. They could smell the fear. But Gary wasn't finished. He took a breath, a ragged, sobbing sound. And, sir, there is more. Because the funds didn't clear by the deadline, the secondary clause kicked in. The creditors moved immediately. What creditors? Preston demanded, his voice rising, losing control. What are you talking about? The default, sir. The automatic default on the loans. Since the account was empty, at 10 o'clock, the bank triggered the asset seizure protocols. Preston grabbed Gary by the lapels of his jacket, shaking him. What seizure? What are they doing? They are here, sir. Gary wept, pointing toward the main driveway. They are at the house. They are putting padlocks on the gates. They are tagging the inventory. They are seizing the assets, Preston. They are taking the company. They are taking the cars. They are taking the house. Right now. Preston let go of Gary. He stumbled back as if he had been shot. He looked around the tent wildly. He looked at the guests, who were now murmuring, standing up, pulling out their phones to record the meltdown. He looked at the luxury he had surrounded himself with, realizing it was all dissolving like sugar in hot water. He looked at the entrance of the tent. He saw two men in dark suits walking down the aisle. They weren't guests. They walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of law enforcement. They were carrying clipboards. They were carrying eviction notices. Preston's breathing became ragged. He clutched his chest. He looked for someone to blame. He looked for a scapegoat. His eyes found me again. I was still standing in the back. I hadn't moved. I was the calm center of the storm he had created. I watched him unravel. I watched the realization dawn on him. He pointed a shaking finger at me from the stage. You, he screamed, his voice cracking, his composure shattered. You did this. You brought this bad luck. I told you not to come. I told you you were poison. He ran down the steps of the altar, tripping on the hem of the tablecloth. He scrambled up and charged down the aisle toward me, pushing guests out of his way. This is your fault, he shrieked, foaming at the mouth, a madman in a tuxedo. You jinxed it. You witch. You jealous little failure. You came here to ruin me. He was coming for me. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to make me pay for his sins. But he didn't know. He didn't know that I wasn't just the bad luck. I was the bank. I was the creditor. I was the one who had signed the order to seize his life. I stood my ground. I watched him run toward me, and for the first time I didn't see a monster. I just seen a sad, broke man running toward a wall he couldn't break. Mr. Henderson stepped out from behind the pillar next to me. He stepped calmly into the aisle, blocking Preston's path. He held up a hand. That is enough, Mr. Preston, Mr. Henderson said, his voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the chaos like a knife. Preston stopped, panting, his chest heaving. He looked at Mr. Henderson. He looked at the briefcase in his hand. Who are you? Preston spat. Get out of my way. I need to throw this trash out. I would advise against touching my client, Mr. Henderson said coolly. Especially since she is currently the owner of the property you are standing on. Preston froze. He blinked. He looked from Mr. Henderson to me. Client. Owner. What are you talking about? Mr. Henderson opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of documents stamped with the seal of the state court. My name is Arthur Henderson. I am the attorney representing the trust that just purchased your distressed debt portfolio. And this, he handed the papers to Preston, who took them with numb fingers. This is the notification that your mortgage, your business loans, and your personal lines of credit have all been acquired by a single entity. An entity that has chosen to exercise its right to immediate foreclosure due to your default. Preston looked at the papers. He couldn't read them, his hands were shaking too hard. Who, he whispered. Who bought the debt? Who is doing this to me? Mr. Henderson turned and gestured to me with a small deferential bow. Allow me to introduce your primary creditor, the sole proprietor of the trust, Ms. Paige Wilson. The world stopped. The guests gasped. Preston dropped the papers. They scattered on the red carpet white sheets of doom at his feet. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a horror that went beyond bankruptcy. It was the horror of realizing that the person he had stepped on for years had been the one holding up the floor. Paige, he wheezed. I stepped forward. I walked over the papers he had dropped. I stood toe-to-toe with him. Oh. Hello, Preston, I said. I told you the investor wasn't coming. But I did not say no one was coming. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at my dress. He looked at my pearls. He looked at the face of the stepdaughter he had called a failure, and he saw the reflection of his own destruction staring back at him. The $33 million, I said, leaning in so only he could hear the full weight of my words. The money you were waiting for, it was mine, Preston. It was my lottery win. I was going to give it to you. I was going to save you. His knees buckled. He grabbed my arm, not in anger this time, but for support. You were going to... I was, I said. But then you sent me a text. You told me not to come. You told me I was an embarrassment. So I decided to be something else instead. I pulled his hand off my arm. I decided to be your boss. And Preston, you are fired. The silence inside the tent was thick and suffocating like a wool blanket soaked in ice water. Gary, the assistant, stood trembling on the stage, his chest heaving from the sprint and the sheer terror of delivering the death blow to Preston's ego. The guests were frozen in their golden chairs, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths, their polite smiles curdling into confusion and alarm. The string quartet had lowered their bows, the musicians exchanging nervous glances as the air crackled with the static electricity of a disaster unfolding in real time. I watched Preston. I watched the man who had terrorized my mother into submission, who had treated me like a cockroach in his kitchen for over a decade. I watched the color drain from his face, leaving it the shade of old parchment. His eyes, which were usually narrowed in judgment or calculation, were now wide and darting frantically around the room. He looked at the entrance where the foreclosure agents stood like reapers in cheap suits. He looked at his phone, which lay silent and mocking on the podium. He looked at the guests, the senators and the CEOs, the people whose validation he craved more than air. He realized in that moment that the facade was not just cracking, it was shattering. The empire he had built on leverage and lies was evaporating into mist. The humiliation was total. The exposure was absolute. And for a narcissist like Preston, there is nothing more terrifying than being seen for what he truly is. A fraud, a failure, a small man in a big suit. His brain could not process the reality of his own incompetence. He could not accept that his financial ruin was the result of his own greed and stupidity. His mind snapped. It rejected the truth and scrambled for a narrative that made sense to him, a narrative where he was the victim and someone else was the villain. He needed a target. He needed a lightning rod for the storm raging inside him. His eyes scanned the room, wild and unseeing, until they locked onto the one thing that did not fit his perfect picture. The one thing that had defied him. Me. I was standing at the back of the tent, a statue in red silk. I had not moved. I had not flinched. I was watching him with a calm that must have looked like arrogance to him. I saw the recognition spark in his eyes. I saw the moment the switch flipped. The fear in his face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "It is you," he breathed into the microphone, his voice a low growl that was amplified across the silent tent. He pointed a shaking finger at me. The movement was violent, accusatory. "It is you," he screamed, his voice cracking and escalating into a shriek that made the guests flinch. He abandoned the podium. He did not walk down the steps. He stumbled down them, his coordination gone, his expensive Italian loafers catching on the carpet. He almost fell, but he caught himself on a floral arrangement, sending a spray of white roses crashing to the floor. He kicked them aside, trampling the delicate petals into the dirt without a second glance. He marched down the center aisle. His face was a mottled purple, his veins bulging in his neck like cords of rope. He looked deranged. He looked like a man who had lost his mind and found a weapon. "It is you," he shouted again, closing the distance between us. "You did this. You brought this on me." The guests shrank back in their seats, pulling their legs in as he stormed past them. They were witnessing a breakdown, a public self-destruction, and they could not look away. Phones were raised, recording every second of his madness. I stood my ground. My heart hammered against my ribs, a war drum in my chest, but I forced my face to remain impassive. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. I had spent too many years being afraid of this man. I had spent my childhood hiding in my room, listening to his footsteps in the hallway, praying he would not stop at my door. I was done hiding. Preston stopped 3 feet from me. He was panting, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He smelled of sour sweat and expensive scotch. Spittle flew from his lips as he screamed in my face. "From the moment you walked in here, the luck turned," he spat. "I felt it. I felt the cold air come in with you. You are a curse, Paige. You have always been a curse. You are a black cloud that follows this family around, raining on everything we try to build." He waved his arms wildly, gesturing at the tent, at the foreclosure agents, at the ruins of his wedding. "I told Brenda to keep you away. I told her you were poison. But you just had to come, didn't you? You just had to drag your misery in here and infect us. You jinxed the transfer. You put your evil eye on my business. This is your fault. All of it. It was irrational. It was insane." To blame a wire transfer failure on the presence of a stepdaughter was the logic of a madman. But Preston believed it. In that moment, he truly believed that I was a witch who had summoned a financial hurricane just to spite him. "Get out!" he roared, lunging toward me. "Get out of my sight! Get off my property! You are a parasite! You are nothing!" He raised a hand as if to strike me or shove me. The guests gasped. A few people half rose from their seats, but no one moved to stop him. They were paralyzed by the raw violence of his outburst. But I did not flinch. I looked at his raised hand, and then I looked into his eyes. "Go ahead, Preston," I thought. "Do it. Give me one more reason to bury you." Before his hand could descend, a figure blurred into my peripheral vision. It was Jamal. My brother-in-law saw an opportunity. He saw Preston's rage, and he saw a chance to align himself with power, to be the loyal soldier who defended the king. He didn't realize the king was already dead. He didn't realize he was pledging allegiance to a corpse. Jamal stepped in front of Preston, puffing out his chest, blocking me from the older man. He turned to face me, his handsome face twisted into a mask of professional disdain. He adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous tic he used when he was trying to intimidate opposing counsel. "That is enough," Page Jamal said, his voice projecting the smooth, practiced authority of a courtroom bully. "You heard, Mr. Preston. You are trespassing. You are causing a disturbance. You are inflicting emotional distress on the groom and the bride on their wedding day." He pointed at the exit, echoing Preston's gesture. "I am going to handle this," Jamal announced loudly, looking over his shoulder at Preston, seeking approval, like a dog waiting for a treat. "Do not worry, Preston. I will take care of this trash." He turned back to me, his eyes cold and empty. "I am giving you 1 minute to vacate the premises voluntarily, Paige. If you do not, I will personally escort you out, and then I will call the police. I will have you arrested for harassment. I will have you arrested for trespassing. I will sue you for every penny you— Oh, wait." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that grated on my ears. "I forgot. You do not have any pennies. You have nothing. So I will just have you thrown in a cell where you belong." He took a step toward me, invading my personal space. "Security!" he shouted, waving his arm toward the perimeter of the tent. "Security, get over here. We have an intruder. We have a crazy woman who refuses to leave. Remove this girl immediately. Throw her out on the street." Two security guards in black blazers hesitated near the entrance. They looked at Preston, who was foaming at the mouth. They looked at Jamal, who was preening in his tuxedo. And then they looked at me. They looked at my red dress, which cost more than their annual salaries combined. They looked at the pearls around my neck. They looked at the calm steel in my eyes. They did not move. They were seasoned professionals. They knew the smell of trouble, and they knew that the woman standing still and silent was not the one causing the scene. Jamal saw their hesitation, and his face flushed with anger. "Did you hear me?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "I said remove her. I am the groom's son-in-law. I am a partner at Davis and Hart. Do what I say, or I will have your jobs. I will sue your security firm into oblivion." He turned back to me, reaching out to grab my shoulder. "Fine. If they won't do it, I will do it myself." His hand clamped onto my bare shoulder, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. It was the touch of a man who was used to getting his way, used to women moving when he told them to move. "You are leaving, Paige," he hissed in my ear. "You are going back to the gutter. You are going to walk out of here, and you are never going to speak to my wife or her mother again. You are done. You are extinct. You are." The pain in my shoulder was sharp, but it felt distant. It felt like a memory of pain, because the woman he was grabbing, the woman he was threatening, didn't exist anymore. He was grappling with a ghost. I looked down at his hand on my shoulder. I looked at his wedding ring, the platinum band that my mother had paid for. Then I looked up into his eyes. "Take your hand off me, Jamal," I said. My voice was not loud. It did not scream. It did not shout. It was a whisper that carried the weight of an executioner's blade. It cut through his bluster. It cut through his arrogance. It cut through the noise of the tent. "Take your hand off me." He froze. He saw something in my eyes that he had never seen before. He saw the abyss. He saw the end of his world staring back at him. "I am not the one trespassing," I said, "and I am not the one who is going to be arrested today." Just then a heavy briefcase slammed onto the table next to us. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. Jamal jumped, releasing my shoulder. Preston blinked, snapping out of his trance. We both turned. Mr. Henderson stood there. He had moved silently through the chaos like a shark through water. He stood between me and the men who wanted to destroy me. He adjusted his glasses calmly. He looked at Jamal with the bored expression of a man who ate lawyers like him for lunch. "I would strongly advise you not to touch my client again, Mr. Jamal," Mr. Henderson said, his voice dry and crisp. "Assaulting a billionaire in front of 200 witnesses is not a strategic legal move. In fact, it is a very expensive mistake." Jamal stared at him. Billionaire. The word did not make sense. It was a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" Jamal sputtered. "She is a cashier. She is nobody." Mr. Henderson ignored him. He turned to Preston, who was still breathing heavily, his face slick with sweat. "Mr. Preston, I believe you asked for security to remove the person who does not belong here." Preston nodded eagerly, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Yes. Get her out. She is the bad luck. She is the curse." Mr. Henderson shook his head slowly. "I'm afraid you are confused, sir. Ms. Wilson is not the intruder." He opened the briefcase. He pulled out the deed. He pulled out the foreclosure notice. He held them up so Preston could see the official seals, so he could see the signatures. "Ms. Wilson is the owner of this property. She is the owner of the debt you defaulted on 25 minutes ago. She is the entity that just seized your assets." Mr. Henderson turned to the security guards who were watching intently. "Gentlemen," he said, "Ms. Wilson is the new owner of this estate. She would like to have these two men removed from the premises immediately. They are trespassing, and they are harassing the landlord." The security guards nodded. They understood power, and they knew exactly where it stood in this room. They stepped forward, moving past me, moving past Mr. Henderson, moving toward Preston and Jamal. Preston looked at the guards. He looked at the papers in Mr. Henderson's hand. He looked at me. The rage drained out of him, leaving him empty. The delusion shattered. He realized in a horrifying instant that the bad luck wasn't supernatural. It was financial. And the checkmate had been delivered by the pawn he had tried to sacrifice. Paige. He whispered the name falling from his lips like a prayer. I didn't answer. I just watched as the guards took his arms. I watched as Jamal tried to back away, stammering excuses, his arrogance dissolving into cowardice. I brushed my shoulder where Jamal had touched me. I smoothed my red dress. I told you to move, Jamal, I said softly. But you didn't listen. Now you are going to be moved. I did not move an inch. The chaos swirled around me like a hurricane, but I was the eye calm and still. Preston was screaming for security, his face a mask of purple rage and spit flying from his lips as he demanded my removal. Jamal was puffing his chest out, trying to physically herd me toward the exit like unwanted livestock. The guests were murmuring a sea of confused faces, witnessing the meltdown of a man who claimed to be a king. But I remained rooted to the spot, my heels digging into the expensive carpet, my red dress a flag of defiance. I did not flinch when Preston lunged. I did not step back when Jamal threatened. I simply watched them with the cold detachment of a judge watching a guilty man plea for mercy. Then the dynamic shifted. It wasn't a shout or a shove, it was a presence. Mr. Henderson stepped forward from the shadows of the tent's periphery. He moved with the silent, heavy grace of a luxury sedan. Flanking him were two men who looked less like security guards and more like walls wearing suits. They were broad, impassive, and radiated a kind of professional danger that made the resort's rental security look like mall cops. They stepped seamlessly between me and the screaming men, creating a physical barrier that Jamal bounced off of like a rubber ball. Mr. Henderson adjusted his silk tie and cleared his throat. The sound was soft, but it carried an authority that silenced the string quartet and the gasping guests instantly. He held a leather portfolio in his hand, not clutching it like a lifeline, but carrying it like a weapon. Mr. Preston, he said, his voice smooth and dry like expensive gin. I would strongly suggest you lower your voice. You are making a scene on my client's property. Preston blinked, his momentum arrested by the sudden appearance of this stranger. He looked at the bodyguards, then at Mr. Henderson. The confusion on his face warred with his anger. Who are you? Preston demanded, though his voice wavered slightly. This is a private event. You are trespassing. Security, get these people out of here! The resort security guards who had been hovering nervously near the entrance did not move. They looked at Mr. Henderson's suit, which cost more than their cars, and they looked at the two giants standing beside him. They made the smart choice and stayed put. I am not trespassing, Mr. Henderson said calmly, opening the leather portfolio. And neither is Ms. Wilson. In fact, you are the one currently occupying space that no longer belongs to you. Preston scoffed, a desperate, incredulous sound. What are you talking about? I own this estate. I built this company. I am the one waiting for the funding. Ah, yes, the funding, Mr. Henderson said, extracting a crisp, blue document from the file. The $33 million injection from the blind trust, the lifeline you were praying for. Preston's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. Yes, that is it. Are you the representative? Do you have the transfer? Is the money here? He stepped forward, his hands reaching out greedily, ignoring the fact that he had just been screaming. Mr. Henderson did not hand him the money. Instead, he handed him a single sheet of paper. It was a notification of cancellation. I am indeed the representative, Mr. Henderson said. But I am not here to fund you, Mr. Preston. I am here to inform you that the transfer was cancelled at 9:59 this morning. The trust has withdrawn its offer. There is no money coming. Preston stared at the paper in his hands. His hands began to shake violently, the paper rattling like a leaf in a gale. Cancelled, he whispered, the words strangling him. But I have loans due at noon. If that money doesn't clear, if that money does not clear, you default, Mr. Henderson finished for him. And that brings me to the second document. He pulled a thicker stack of papers from the portfolio. These were heavy bonded legal documents, stamped with the seal of the New York State Supreme Court. When the trust withdrew the offer, they decided to take a different investment strategy. Mr. Henderson explained, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. Rather than investing in your company as a partner, they chose to acquire your liabilities. Preston looked up, his eyes glassy and uncomprehending. Acquire what? Your debt, Mr. Preston. The trust purchased your distressed debt portfolio from your original lenders this morning, the mortgage on this estate in the Hamptons, the commercial loans for your construction firm, the personal lines of credit you used to finance this wedding. Mr. Henderson paused, letting the words sink into the humid air of the tent. All of it. Every cent you owe now belongs to the trust, and since you failed to make your noon balloon payment, the trust has exercised its right to immediate foreclosure and asset seizure. Preston dropped the papers. He looked like he was going to be sick. He looked around the room at the guests, who were now standing witnessing the execution of his social standing. You can't do this, he stammered. I need time. I can get the money. Who is doing this? Who is the trust? I demand to speak to the owner. Mr. Henderson smiled, a thin, razor-sharp expression. I was hoping you would ask that. He stepped aside, clearing the line of sight between Preston and me. He gestured to me with an open hand, presenting me like a master of ceremonies presenting the main act. Mr. Preston, please calm down. You cannot evict your creditor. Allow me to introduce you to the sole beneficiary and owner of the trust. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. Ms. Paige Wilson. Mr. Henderson announced, his voice ringing out. She is the one who canceled the transfer. She is the one who bought your debt. And she is the one who now owns this house, this company, and effectively, your future. Preston stared at me. He looked at the red dress. He looked at the pearls. He looked at the face of the girl he had tormented for a decade. The girl he had called a failure. The girl he had told to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. Ashley let out a small, choked sob. Jamal took a step back, his face draining of color as he realized he had just threatened to drag a multimillionaire out of her own building. Paige Preston whispered, This is a joke. She works at Target. She drives a Honda with no muffler. She is a nobody. She is the winner of the Powerball jackpot. Mr. Henderson corrected him, his voice cold. $124 million, Mr. Preston. Ms. Wilson is not a nobody. She is the bank. I stepped forward. The heels of my shoes clicked on the dance floor that Preston had paid for, with money he didn't have. I walked right up to him until I was close enough to smell the fear sweating out of his pores. I watched his brain try to process the information. I watched him try to reconcile the image of the stepdaughter he despised with the reality of the woman who held his life in her hands. He looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years he didn't look down. He looked up. You were the investor, he stammered. The 33 million. It was you. It was me. I said, my voice soft and lethal. I was going to give it to you, Preston. I was going to sign it over this morning. I was going to save your company. I was going to save this house. I was going to let you have your big day and your big ego. Why didn't you? He asked, his voice cracking. Because you sent me a text, I said. You told me I wasn't good enough to be seen. You told me I was an embarrassment. You told me to stay away because I didn't fit your aesthetic. I leaned in closer. Well, Preston, I decided to change my aesthetic. I decided that instead of being the embarrassing stepdaughter, I would be the woman who evicts you. He fell to his knees. It wasn't a figure of speech. His legs simply gave out and he collapsed onto the white carpet in a heap of expensive fabric and ruined pride. He reached out for my hand, but the bodyguard intercepted him, blocking his grasp with a forearm of steel. Paige, Please, Preston wept right there in front of the senators and the bankers. Please don't do this. We are family. I helped raise you. You didn't raise me, I said, looking down at him. You tolerated me. And you charged me for the privilege. I looked at Mr. Henderson. Execute the foreclosure, I said, and have security escort Mr. Preston and his son-in-law off the premises. I want this tent cleared in an hour. Mr. Henderson nodded. With pleasure, Ms. Wilson. I turned my back on Preston's sobbing form. I turned my back on Jamal's terrified face. I looked out at the sea of guests who were staring at me with a mixture of awe and fear. The wedding is over, I announced. Thank you for coming. And then I walked away, leaving the wreckage of their vanity behind me. The silence that descended on the tent wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It was the kind of silence that follows a gunshot or a car crash. The string quartet had frozen their bows, hovering inches above the strings. The waiters stood like statues, trays of champagne tilting dangerously in their hands. Even the birds outside seemed to have stopped singing out of respect for the sheer magnitude of the disaster unfolding before them. I stood there in my red dress, the center of this sudden vacuum. Preston was on his knees at my feet, a broken man in a $5,000 tuxedo, weeping into the carpet. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at the rest of them, the people who had laughed at me, the people who had looked down on me, the people who had treated me like a stain they couldn't scrub out. To my left, Ashley stood near the champagne tower. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her mouth was open slightly, a little O of disbelief. In her hand she held a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon. I watched as her fingers simply gave up. They opened slowly and voluntarily as her brain tried and failed to process what I had just said. The glass fell. It seemed to fall in slow motion, turning over and over in the air, catching the light one last time before it hit the hardwood dance floor. Smash. The sound was explosive in the quiet room. Shards of crystal exploded outward like a grenade sparkling in the stage lights. Champagne splashed across the hem of her designer gown, soaking the silk in a dark spreading stain. Ashley didn't even flinch. She didn't look down at her ruined dress. She didn't look at the mess she had made. She just stared at me, her eyes wide and glassy, unable to look away from the sister she had tried to buy off with $100 bill less than an hour ago. Next to her, my mother Brenda looked like she had been turned to stone. She was clutching her bouquet so hard that the stems were snapping one by one, a dry, cracking sound that punctuated the silence. Her face was pale, drained of all blood, all color, all life. She looked at Preston sobbing on the floor. She looked at Mr. Henderson holding the foreclosure papers. And then she looked at me. I saw the gears turning behind her eyes. I saw her trying to rewrite the narrative, trying to find a way to make this make sense in a world where she was the queen and I was the peasant. It wasn't working. The math wasn't adding up. The reality was crashing down on her like a tidal wave, and she had nowhere to run. Then Jamal spoke. His voice was high and thin, cracking with a desperate sort of hysteria. He stepped forward, his hands shaking as he pointed at me. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, looking from Mr. Henderson to me and back again. This is insane. She is lying. You are all lying." He looked around the room, seeking validation, seeking someone, anyone to agree with him. "She works at Target," he shouted, his voice rising to a screech. "She scans barcodes for a living. She drives a Honda with 3 hubcaps. Where would she get $33 million? Did she rob a bank? Is that it? Is she a criminal?" He laughed, a frantic, bubbling sound that bordered on madness. "That is it, isn't it? She is a criminal. Arrest her. She probably stole a credit card. She probably hacked into a system. There is no way. There is absolutely no way that Paige Wilson has $33 million. She can't even afford to fix her air conditioning." He looked at me, his eyes bulging with the effort of his denial. "Tell them, Paige. Tell them it is a joke. Tell them you are lying before you go to jail." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just looked at Mr. Henderson. He adjusted his glasses calmly, unflappable in the face of Jamal's breakdown. He opened his portfolio again, extracting a single document. It was a copy of the official Lottery Commission payout form, certified and stamped. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, his voice projecting to the back of the tent clear and precise. Miss Wilson is not a criminal, Mr. Jamal, nor is she a liar. The $33 million was merely the portion of her wealth she had allocated for this family's rescue. A rescue, I might add, that you have profoundly failed to merit. He held up the document. The total sum of Ms. Wilson's current liquid assets is significantly higher. 48 hours ago, Ms. Wilson claimed the sole winning ticket for the multi-state Powerball jackpot. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, letting them sink into the pores of every person in the room. The total prize was $200 million. After taxes and lump sum adjustments, Ms. Wilson's current net worth is $124 million. $124 million. The number echoed in the tent. It bounced off the canvas walls. It rattled the crystal chandeliers. It hit Jamal in the chest like a physical blow. He stumbled back, his legs hitting a chair. He sat down hard, collapsing, as if his strings had been cut. 200 million, he whispered. He looked at me with new eyes. He wasn't seeing his sister-in-law anymore. He wasn't seeing the woman he had mocked in the driveway. He was seeing a god. He was seeing the kind of money he had spent his entire life chasing, the kind of money he had married Ashley to get close to. And it was standing right in front of him, wearing a red dress and a look of absolute indifference. Ashley let out a sound that was half sob, half whimper. She looked down at the broken glass at her feet. She looked at the stain on her dress. She realized in that moment that she had bet on the wrong horse. She had spent her life competing with me, trying to beat me, trying to be the winner. And in one morning, she had lost everything. Brenda, my mother, finally moved. She took a step toward me, her hands unclenching from the ruined bouquet. Her eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, terrifying clarity. She wasn't looking at me with love. She wasn't looking at me with pride. She was looking at me with hunger. She saw the houses she could buy. She saw the trips she could take. She saw the debts she could pay. She saw her salvation standing in heels. She took a breath, ready to launch into a speech, ready to play the mother card, ready to rewrite history again. But I cut her off with a look. I looked at her with the cold, hard eyes of a stranger. I looked at her the way a banker looks at a bad investment. And the silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of Preston weeping on the floor, the sound of a man mourning the death of his ego. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of victory. It was the sound of the world finally righting itself. Mr. Henderson closed his portfolio with a sharp snap. Now, he said, his voice breaking the spell, as the owner of the property, Ms. Wilson has requested that the premises be vacated. You have 1 hour to remove your personal effects before the locks are changed. I suggest you start packing. The reality hit them then. The wedding was over. The party was over. The life they knew was over. And all that was left was the long walk to the parking lot and the knowledge that they had thrown away the only person who could have saved them. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting from me like the Red Sea. I didn't look back at the chaos I left behind. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it looked like. It looked like justice. The silence that had gripped the tent shattered not with a bang, but with a collective exhale of greed. I watched it happen in slow motion. I watched the realization ripple through my family like a virus. They were not looking at a foreclosure notice anymore. They were not looking at a woman they despised. They were looking at a walking ATM. They were looking at a golden ticket that had just walked in through the back door wearing a red dress. The transformation was visceral. It was nauseating. It was a masterclass in human hypocrisy performed by people who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of the lie. Preston was the first to move. He was still on his knees on the white carpet, the fabric of his expensive tuxedo straining against his thighs. A moment ago, he had been weeping for his lost empire. He had been trembling with the fear of a man facing the abyss. But now, as the number $124 million echoed in his brain, something shifted. The fear evaporated, replaced by a desperate, oily cunning. He did not stand up. He stayed on the knees, not in defeat, but in a grotesque parody of supplication. He shuffled forward on his knees, moving toward me like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. He reached out with hands that were suddenly steady, palms up open and begging. Paige, he choked out his voice, trembling with an emotion that sounded like relief, but felt like manipulation. Paige, honey, look at you. Just look at you. He wiped the tears from his cheeks with the back of his hand and forced a smile onto his face. It was a terrifying expression, a rictus of teeth and wet eyes that was meant to look like pride, but looked more like hunger. You did it, he whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. You actually did it. I knew you had it in you. I always knew. I stared down at him, my expression unmoving. You knew I had it in me to evict you, Preston. Is that what you mean? He laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. He shook his head dismissively, as if I had just told a charming joke. No, no, sweetheart. You do not understand. Everything I did, everything we did, it was a test. He gestured around the room, at the luxury, at the guests, at the life he had built on credit. I was hard on you, Paige. I know I was. I was tough. I made you work for every dime. I made you struggle. But do you know why? Because I saw the potential in you. I saw the diamond in the rough. I knew that if I made it easy for you, you would never develop the strength you needed to survive in this world. He reached for the hem of my dress, his fingers brushing the silk. I stepped back, repulsed by his touch. I was teaching you resilience. He continued, his voice gaining strength, his confidence returning with every lie he spun. I was teaching you how to handle pressure. And look at you now. You are standing here strong, powerful, wealthy. You passed the test, Paige. You are the woman I always wanted you to be. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He raised an eyebrow, silently asking if I wanted him to intervene. I shook my head slightly. I wanted to hear this. I wanted to see just how low he would go. So the insults were a lesson, I asked, my voice flat. Calling me a failure. Telling me to get a second job when I had pneumonia. That was all mentorship. It was tough love, Preston said, nodding eagerly. It broke my heart to do it, Paige. It really did. I cried myself to sleep some nights worrying about you. But I knew I had to be strong. I had to push you. And it worked, didn't it? You went out there and you made something of yourself. You won the ultimate prize. And now we can finally be the family I always dreamed of. We can run this empire together. You have the capital, I have the experience. We will be unstoppable. He was already spending my money. He was already rewriting the narrative to make himself the architect of my fortune. It was delusional. It was pathetic. And it was exactly what I expected. But before I could answer, a blur of champagne silk rushed past him. It was my mother. Brenda had recovered from her shock. The color had returned to her cheeks, fueled by the rush of adrenaline that comes with realizing you might not have to be poor after all. She shoved Preston aside, almost knocking him over in her haste to get to me. She did not look at the guests. She did not look at her husband. She only had eyes for me. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with tears that looked disturbingly genuine. She threw her arms out wide, a gesture of maternal welcome that I had not seen in 20 years. "My baby!" she wailed, her voice cracking with theatrical emotion. "My sweet baby girl." She crashed into me, wrapping her arms around my stiff body. She smelled of expensive perfume and fear. She pressed her wet cheek against my neck, sobbing loudly. "Oh, Paige, I knew it. A mother always knows. I felt it in my bones that you were destined for greatness." She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, her hands gripping my shoulders. She looked me up and down, drinking in the sight of the daughter she had tried to hide in a service corridor 15 minutes ago. "I am so sorry about the text message," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. You have to understand, honey. I was just trying to protect you. Protect me, I repeated, looking into her eyes, searching for a shred of the truth. You told me I was an embarrassment, Mom. You told me I would ruin the aesthetic. I was protecting you from them, she insisted, gesturing vaguely at the crowd of onlookers. Look at these people, Paige. They are sharks. They are judgmental. They are cruel. I knew you were sensitive. I knew how hard you have been working. I didn't want you to feel out of place. I didn't want you to be overwhelmed by the crowds and the noise. I sent you away because I love you too much to see you uncomfortable. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't lived through the last decade of neglect, I might have believed her. She was rewriting history in real time, painting herself as the protective lioness instead of the woman who had sold her cub for a seat at the table. And the money, I asked. The check you tried to take. The $200. She laughed a high, nervous sound and waved her hand as if swatting away a fly. Oh, that. That was just. I was confused. I was stressed. You know how I get when I'm planning an event? I just wanted to make sure you had enough for a nice lunch. I wanted you to treat yourself. I never meant to hurt you, baby. I would never hurt you. You are my flesh and blood. You are my heart. She reached up and touched the pearls at my throat. Her fingers lingered on them, caressing the gems. I saw the greed flare in her pupils. And look at you wearing Grandma's pearls. They look so beautiful on you. Much better than they looked on Ashley. I always meant for you to have them. I was just keeping them safe for you until you were ready. And you are ready now, aren't you? Now. You are ready to take your place as the head of this family. Behind her, Ashley was wiping her eyes, sniffing loudly. She had abandoned her post by the champagne tower and was edging closer, trying to slip into the circle of warmth. Jamal was right behind her, smoothing his tuxedo, trying to look like a supportive brother-in-law instead of a man who had threatened to call the police on me. Paige, Ashley said, her voice trembling. I am so sorry. I was just jealous. You know that, right? I was always jealous of how strong you were, how independent. I lashed out because I wanted to be like you. Can you forgive me? Can we be sisters again, please? I miss you. I looked at them. My mother clutching my arms, my stepfather kneeling at my feet, my sister begging for forgiveness she hadn't earned, my brother-in-law looking at his shoes pretending he hadn't just tried to drag me out by my hair. They were a tableau of desperation. They were a monument to avarice. They were my family. And they were lying. Every word was a lie. Every tear was calculated. Every touch was an attempt to pick my pocket. They didn't love me. They loved the $124 million. They loved the power. They loved the safety that I could provide. If I had walked in here with nothing, they would have thrown me to the wolves without a second thought. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. It was like waking up from a long, feverish dream. I saw them not as the giants who had ruled my life, but as the small, grasping people they truly were. They were not scary anymore. They were just sad. I gently removed my mother's hands from my shoulders. I stepped back, creating a physical distance between us that mirrored the emotional chasm that had existed for years. You are protecting me, I said, my voice soft, but carrying to the back of the tent. Yes, Brenda breathed, nodding eagerly, hope lighting up her face. Always, baby, always. And you, Preston, I said, looking down at him, down at Al. You were teaching me resilience. Yes, he said, scrambling to his feet, dusting off his knees, trying to regain some shred of dignity. I was preparing you for this moment, for this success. We are a team, Paige. We always have been. I looked at Ashley. And you? You were just jealous. Yes, she sobbed, nodding. Just a stupid, jealous sister. I love you, Paige. I looked at them all one last time, committing this moment to memory. I wanted to remember exactly what they looked like when they thought they had won. I wanted to remember the hope in their eyes, because I was about to extinguish it. I appreciate the performance, I said. Really. It was very moving. You almost had me convinced. I reached into my purse. They all leaned forward expecting a checkbook, expecting a reprieve. But I pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was the receipt for the certified check I had given to Mr. Henderson, the check for the debt purchase. But there is one problem with your story, I said, unfolding the paper. What is that? Preston asked, his smile faltering. You said you were preparing me for the real world, I said. You said you were teaching me that actions have consequences. You said you were protecting me from people who only wanted me for my money. I looked at my mother. Well, Mom, you taught me well. You taught me that people will say anything when they are desperate. You taught me that loyalty has a price tag. And you taught me that the only person I can trust to protect me is myself. I handed the receipt to Preston. So I am applying those lessons, I said. I am protecting myself. From you. I turned to Mr. Henderson. The eviction notice, I said. Is it ready? Mr. Henderson nodded. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the final document. He handed it to me. I held it out to Preston. You have 1 hour, I said. Not a minute more. The hope vanished from their faces. The masks fell. The greed turned back into hatred in the blink of an eye. You can't do this! Brenda screamed, her voice shrill and ugly. You are my daughter. You owe me. I owe you nothing, I said. And now you owe me $33 million. I turned around and walked away, leaving them screaming in the ruins of their own making. I walked out of the tent, out of the resort, and into the rest of my life. And for the first time, I didn't look back. I stood there amidst the wreckage of their dignity, watching them perform the final act of their desperate play. It was fascinating in a grotesque sort of way. Just minutes ago, Preston had been ready to have me dragged off the property by security guards, and now he was looking at me as if I were the sun, and he was a man who had spent 40 years in a cave. My mother Brenda was clutching my arm, her nails digging into my skin, not to push me away this time, but to anchor herself to my newfound worth. Ashley was sniffing back tears, her eyes darting between me and her husband, wondering if she could salvage her lifestyle by switching sides. They were waiting. The air in the tent was thick with their expectation. They believed that because we shared blood, because they had offered a few mumbled apologies and a hug, that the past was erased. They believed that money fixed everything. They believed that $124 million was enough to buy amnesia. I looked at my mother's face. I saw the greed shimmering just beneath the surface of her tears. She wasn't seeing her daughter. She was seeing a blank check. She was seeing the reinstatement of her credit cards. She was seeing the preservation of her status in the Hamptons. She truly believed that I was going to open my purse and hand them back the life they had just lost. And I decided to give them exactly what they wanted, or at least what they thought they wanted. I reached into my designer bag, the red leather smooth and cool under my fingers. The sound of the zipper opening was loud in the silence. Every head in the family leaned forward instinctively. It was a primal reaction, like sharks sensing blood in the water. Preston stopped his sniveling. Jamal took a half-step closer, his eyes glued to my hands. Even Ashley stopped crying, holding her breath. I reached past the new phone, past the keys to the SUV, and my fingers brushed against something old. It was a small, battered wallet made of cracked faux leather. The edges were peeling, and the zipper was stuck. It was the wallet I had carried for 5 years. It was the wallet that had held my food stamps. It was the wallet that had held the crumpled bills I earned from double shifts at Target. It was a relic of the life they had forced me to live. I pulled it out. The sight of that cheap, ugly thing against the backdrop of my expensive dress and the opulent tent caused a ripple of confusion to cross my mother's face. She recognized it. She had sneered at it a dozen times before, but she didn't say anything. She was too focused on what was inside. I struggled with the zipper for a moment, letting the anticipation build. Then I pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was a check. I had written it that morning in my apartment before the stylists arrived. I had carried it with me next to my heart, waiting for this exact moment. I smoothed the paper out. My movements were slow, deliberate. I held it between my fingers. Brenda gasped. Her eyes locked onto the blue paper. She saw the signature line. She saw the bank logo. She didn't look at the amount yet. She just saw the promise of salvation. For me, she whispered, her hands reaching out, trembling. "Oh, Paige, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let us fall. We are family. Family helps each other. Each." She snatched the check from my hand. She didn't take it gently. She grabbed it with the desperation of a starving animal. Preston crowded in behind her, looking over her shoulder. Ashley craned her neck. Jamal tried to look nonchalant, but he was leaning so far forward he was almost falling over. My mother held the check up to the light, her face glowing with triumph. She looked at the date. She looked at the payee line, which read, Brenda Preston. And then she looked at the amount box. The smile froze. It didn't fade away. Slowly, it simply stopped existing. Her face went slack. Her eyes bulged. She blinked once, twice, thinking her vision was blurry, thinking she had missed a few zeros. Preston let out a sound that was like a balloon deflating. Ashley covered her mouth. Brenda stared at the check. Her hands started to shake again, but this time it wasn't from excitement. It was from a rage so pure it almost set the paper on fire. $200, she shrieked. The scream echoed through the tent, startling the remaining guests who were watching from the sidelines. $200. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of sick joke? You have $100 million and you give me 200. She looked up at me. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly entitlement. What is this supposed to be? She spat, waving the check in my face. Gas money, groceries. This won't even cover the dry cleaning for this dress. I looked her dead in the eye. My voice was calm, cold, and steady. That is the exact amount you threw at me 5 years ago, Mom. Do you remember? She froze, her mouth open. I had pneumonia. I continued, stepping closer to her, forcing her to look at me, forcing her to remember. I was sick. I was burning up with fever. I came to your house because I couldn't afford the urgent care copay. I couldn't afford antibiotics. I thought I was going to die. And I asked you for help. Preston looked away, unable to meet my gaze. But I didn't let him off the hook. I asked you for help, Preston, I said, turning to him. And you reached into your pocket and you threw $200 at my feet. You told me to stop begging. You told me to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. You told me that family wasn't a charity. I turned back to my mother. And you watched him do it. You stood on the balcony drinking your wine, and you watched your husband throw money at your sick daughter like she was a stripper. You didn't come down. You didn't ask if I was okay. You just told me not to get my germs on the upholstery. I pointed at the check in her hand. So I am returning the favor. That is $200, Mom. That is for a taxi to a motel. Because just like you taught me, family isn't a charity. I am standing on my own 2 feet now. And I suggest you start learning to do the same. Brenda crumpled the check in her fist. She looked like she wanted to hit me. She looked like she wanted to tear my eyes out. You ungrateful little witch, she hissed. I gave you life. And I am taking mine back, I said. I looked at Preston. I looked at Jamal. I looked at the tent that represented everything they valued more than me. As for this house, I said, my voice projecting to the corners of the room. As for this estate that you love so much, this symbol of your status and your ego. I checked my watch. It is now 11 o'clock. Mr. Henderson has the paperwork ready. You have exactly 60 minutes to remove your personal belongings. Anything left on the premises after 12 noon becomes the property of the trust, and I will have it thrown in the dumpster. Preston found his voice. It was a weak, reedy thing. But where will we go? You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go. That sounds like a personal problem, I said. But don't worry about the house. It is going to be put to good use. I smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time that day. I have already contacted the contractors, I said. We start renovations on Monday. I am not selling it. I am not living in it. I would never live in a house filled with so much toxicity. Then what? Brenda demanded. What are you going to do with it? I am turning it into a shelter, I said. A sanctuary. For women escaping abuse, Preston asked, hopefully, thinking maybe there was an angle. Maybe there was a way to spin this. No, I said. For dogs. The silence returned, absolute and crushing. Dogs, Ashley whispered, horrified. Yes, I said. Stray dogs. Abandoned dogs. Animals that have been kicked out and left to fend for themselves. Animals that know the value of loyalty. Animals that would never bite the hand that feeds them. I am turning this multi-million-dollar Hamptons estate into the most luxurious dog rescue in the country. Because quite frankly, Mom, the dogs deserve this view more than you do. At least they will appreciate it. I reached out and plucked the crumpled check from my mother's hand. I smoothed it out and tucked it into the breast pocket of Preston's tuxedo. Use it wisely, I said. It is the last dime you will ever get from me. I turned on my heel. My red dress swirled around my legs. I felt the weight of the pearls around my neck, warm and comforting. I walked past them, past their shocked faces, past their ruined lives. I walked down the aisle one last time, not as a bride, not as a daughter, but as a queen, leaving a kingdom she had burned to the ground. Mr. Henderson fell into step beside me, his bodyguards closing ranks behind us. Excellent speech, Ms. Wilson, he murmured. Very dramatic. I didn't say anything. I just walked out of the tent and into the sunlight. The air smelled of the ocean and freedom. I got into the back of the black SUV and closed the door, shutting out the sight of my family for the last time. Drive, I said. And as the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening in the rearview mirror. I knew the house of cards had finally fallen. And I knew that for the first time in my life, I was completely and utterly free. As I watched from the tinted window of the SUV, the sound of sirens cut through the salt air, drowning out the murmur of the scandalized guests. They did not come for a noise complaint or a traffic violation. Two unmarked sedans swerved into the driveway, blocking the exit for the Rolls-Royces and Bentleys trying to flee the disaster. Men in windbreakers emblazoned with federal badges stepped out, moving with the grim purpose of executioners. They walked straight past the valet stand, straight past the weeping bride, and stopped directly in front of Preston. I saw the color drain from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse in a tuxedo. Mr. Henderson had been thorough. He hadn't just bought the debt, he had handed the evidence of Preston's cooked books and wire fraud directly to the FBI. The $33 million transfer he had been praying for was not just a lifeline. It was the final piece of evidence in a Ponzi scheme that had spanned a decade. The handcuffs clicked shut, a cold silver bracelet to replace the gold Rolex he could no longer afford. Preston did not fight. He did not scream. He just sagged like an empty suit, his arrogance finally stripped away, leaving a frightened old man facing federal prison. The guests watched in horrified silence as the groom was shoved into the back of a police cruiser, the flashing lights reflecting off the white tent like a disco ball from hell. Nearby, Jamal stood frozen, his face a mask of pure self-preservation. He watched the police take his father-in-law, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He physically recoiled from Ashley, stepping away from her as if she were contagious. When she reached out a trembling hand for comfort, he turned his back on her, pulling out his phone to call his firm to distance himself from the radioactive fallout of the Wilson family name. Ashley stood alone in her ruined dress, the pearls gone, the money gone, the husband mentally checking out. The golden child was finally tarnished, and there was no one left to polish her. She looked around the empty lawn, her eyes wide and vacant, realizing for the first time that without the money, she was nothing. And then there was my mother. The movers Mr. Henderson had hired were efficient, brutal, and fast. They were already hauling Louis Vuitton trunks and boxes of clothes out of the main house, dumping them unceremoniously onto the pristine front lawn. Brenda sat in the middle of the pile, a queen on a throne of garbage. She was screaming. It wasn't a scream of grief for her husband or her daughter. It was the scream of a woman who had lost her things. She clutched a fur coat to her chest, rocking back and forth, wailing about injustice, about how she deserved better, about how she was the victim. She didn't look at Preston as he was driven away. She looked at the house. She looked at the mansion that was now a dog shelter. That was all she had ever loved, the status, the walls, the image. And now she was just a woman sitting in the dirt with a pile of luggage and a $200 check. I rolled up the window, shutting out the noise. The sirens, the screaming, the accusations, it all faded into a dull hum. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel guilt. I felt weightless. The toxicity that had poisoned my life for decades was being carted away in handcuffs and garbage bags. Mr. Henderson looked at me from the front seat, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "Justice is served, Ms. Wilson," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied, leaning back against the leather seat and closing my eyes. "It is." I signaled the driver and we drove through the gates, leaving the ruins of their vanity in the dust. 6 months is a long time in the world of finance, but it is a lifetime when you are reinventing yourself. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of my penthouse on Park Avenue, looking down at the city that used to chew me up and spit me out. From this height, the people on the sidewalk looked like ants scurrying back and forth in a maze they did not realize they were trapped in. I took a sip of my espresso. It was rich and dark and tasted like victory. I turned away from the view and walked across the room. My heels sank into a Persian rug that was older than the country itself. The apartment was a masterpiece of modern design, steel and glass softened by velvet and art. It was cold, it was clean, and it was mine. Every square inch of it was paid for. Every piece of furniture was chosen by me. There were no hand-me-downs here. There were no stained sofas from a sister who thought she was doing me a favor. I caught my reflection in a large gilt mirror hanging in the hallway. The woman staring back at me was a stranger to the girl who used to scan groceries for minimum wage. Her hair was cut into a sharp, sleek bob that framed a face that had forgotten how to look afraid. She wore a cream-colored power suit tailored to within an inch of its life. She looked like money. She looked like power. She looked like someone you did not cross. I walked into my home office where my assistant was organizing the files for the foundation. The Wilson Initiative was already making waves in the nonprofit world. We provided emergency grants and legal aid to women trapped in financially abusive families, giving them the resources to escape and build their own lives. It was the safety net I never had, and building it had become my obsession. "Ms. Wilson, the helicopter is fueling up on the roof," my assistant said, looking up from her tablet. "You have a meeting with the Board of Trustees in the Hamptons at 2 o'clock. They want to review the final blueprints for the shelter." "Excellent," I said. "Is the car ready?" "Yes, Mom." "Oh, and you have a new email in your personal inbox. It was flagged as urgent, but it is from an unrecognized sender. I thought you should see it before I archive it." I sat down at my desk and woke up my computer. The screen glowed with the logo of my foundation, a golden phoenix rising from the ashes. I opened the email client. There it was, sitting at the top of the list like a piece of digital trash. Subject: "Please, Paige, just hear me out. From Jamal King." I hovered my cursor over the subject line. I had blocked his number. I had blocked his social media. I had blocked every avenue of contact he had tried to use for the last half-year. But desperate people are resourceful. He had created a new email address just to send this. I clicked it open. "Paige," the email read. "I know you hate me. I know I deserve it, but things are bad, really bad. The firm fired me. They said the publicity from Preston's indictment was too toxic. They said they could not have a partner associated with a Ponzi scheme. I have been blacklisted, Paige. No one in the city will hire me. We lost the condo. Ashley is living with a friend in Queens, and I am sleeping in my car. I need a job. Anything. I will answer phones. I will file papers. I know you are hiring for the foundation. Please, I am begging you. We are family. I read the words, and I waited to feel something. I waited for a pang of pity. I waited for the old instinct to kick in, the one that said I should help, the one that said I should be the bigger person. But there was nothing. Just a hollow echo where my sympathy used to be. I remembered the way he had looked at me in the driveway of the resort. I remembered the way he had laughed at my car. I remembered him grabbing my shoulder, threatening to have me arrested, threatening to throw me in a cell. He hadn't cared about family then. He hadn't cared about blood or loyalty when he thought I was beneath him. He only cared now because the shoe was on the other foot, and he was the one being stepped on. He didn't want a job. He wanted a handout. He wanted access. He wanted to be close to the money again. I looked at the delete button. It was a small trash can icon. It was so simple. One click and he was gone. One click and the noise stopped. I didn't hesitate. I didn't write a reply. I didn't tell him to rot. I didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing I had even read it. Silence is the loudest answer you can give to a narcissist. Click. The email vanished. Deleted. Purged. Gone. I closed the laptop with a satisfying snap. I stood up and smoothed my jacket. "Is everything okay, Ms. Wilson?" my assistant asked, noting the small smile playing on my lips. "Everything is perfect," I said. "Let's go." We took the private elevator up to the roof. The wind whipped at my clothes as I stepped out onto the helipad. The helicopter was waiting, its blades spinning a silver blur against the blue sky. It was a sleek black machine, a predator of the sky. I walked toward it, ducking my head instinctively. The pilot gave me a thumbs up. I climbed into the leather seat and put on the headset. The noise of the city faded away, replaced by the rhythmic thumping of the rotors. As we lifted off, I looked down at Manhattan one last time. I saw the grid of streets, the flow of traffic, the millions of people fighting for their place in the world. Somewhere down there in the shadows of the skyscrapers, Jamal was sleeping in his car. Somewhere down there, Preston was sitting in a federal holding cell, waiting for his trial. Somewhere down there, my mother and Ashley were learning what it meant to survive without a safety net. I felt a strange sense of gratitude toward them. They had broken me, yes. They had hurt me in ways that would take a lifetime to heal. But in doing so, they had forged me into something unbreakable. They had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. You cannot buy respect. You cannot buy love. But you can buy freedom. The helicopter banked, turning toward the ocean. I watched the city shrink behind me, becoming nothing more than a toy, set a memory of a life I used to live. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the cashier. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the disappointment. I looked out at the horizon where the sky met the sea. It was wide open. It was limitless. I settled back into my seat and watched the world disappear beneath me. I was the pilot of my own life now, and I had a lot of flying to do. Here is the lesson learned from Paige's story, along with a call to action. The most profound lesson from Paige's journey is that true self-worth must never be tethered to the approval of others, even if those people are your own flesh and blood. For a decade, Paige allowed her family to define her value based on her financial struggles, accepting their cruelty as the price of admission for their conditional love. They treated her kindness as weakness and her poverty as a character flaw. However, the moment the power dynamic shifted, their masks disintegrated, revealing that their loyalty was nothing more than a transaction. Money did not change who Paige was. It simply revealed who they were. The lottery win acted as a catalyst, stripping away the excuses and exposing the raw greed at the core of her family dynamics. The story illustrates that toxic relationships often survive on the victim's hope, the desperate childlike hope that if they just give enough, forgive enough, or succeed enough, they will finally be deemed worthy. Paige's ultimate victory was not the foreclosure of the estate or the humiliation of her stepfather. It was the death of that hope. She finally understood that you cannot buy respect from people who profit from your low self-esteem. Furthermore, this narrative serves as a stark reminder that arrogance is a brittle shield. Preston and Brenda believed their social status and wealth insulated them from consequences, but their hubris became the architect of their destruction. True freedom isn't found in a penthouse or a helicopter. It is found in the ability to set a boundary that cannot be crossed. Paige didn't just walk away with millions. She walked away with her dignity, proving that the most expensive thing you can ever possess is your own peace of mind. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice to cut off toxic family members to save your own sanity, hit that like button and share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and reclaiming your power.